would love to see God do in this city is use his church to, resolve and heal some of the issues that are affecting people today. God has called us to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world, and I'd love to see us be that in this city. Coming out of COVID, there's so much anxiety and loneliness as people are disconnected from their workplaces and the people around them. I would love to see God use the church and use us to resolve that and bring people back into community, back into family and connection, that we can bring his peace to calm the anxiety out there and bring his love to bring people back into community. And that's what I would love to see God do in this city.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you happen to be tuning into this. It's great to be with you in this way, and I cannot wait. We are inching closer to being able to gather together again. We're hoping to do that next Sunday on the 28th of February, but also on the 7th of March, gathering together at the Doherty Centre. I'm really excited about that. I hope that you are too. 7th of March, mark it in your diary. Don't miss the celebration of us being able to come together. Well, if you've been tracking along with us over the last few weeks as we've been looking at this book of Joshua, you might remember last week that Rahab had heard that God had parted the Red Sea for the Israelites, and that miraculous act became clear evidence for her that God was with the Israelite people and she was on the wrong team. So she jumped ship and join them. Well, today we're about to see that the Israelites again are on the edge of a body of water, this time on the edge of the River Jordan. And a question looms over this passage: what will God do this time? Well, that is what we're going to look at. Well, I just want to give you a little bit of a recap for how we've got to this point, why we are looking at the book of Joshua right now. So we feel that God has kind of prophetically led us to look at this book. He's spoken through it in a number of different ways for us at this point in time as a community on Sydney's North Shore. But like God's word is always alive, it's always speaking, his word is alive and active, but it does feel like uniquely, specifically, that God has some things that he wants to say through this book to us. Because like the Israelites, we are a people on the move. We're pilgrims who are on the journey. And like the Israelites, God has been leading us through something of a wilderness period as we've kind of gone through this global pandemic. Like the Israelites, we also find ourselves right now on the cusp, about to enter a new season, about to cross, in a sense, our River Jordan into the promised land of being able to gather together again on Sundays. Like the Israelites, although we're about to enter this long-awaited promised land, in a sense, we're entering enemy territory, and we need to prepare ourselves for battle. That's something I'm going to touch on a little bit today. And also, like the Israelites, whilst we will be engaging in battle, and we are engaging in battle, we need to remember the battle belongs to the Lord. He's the one who's victorious. We're on the winning team. And ultimately, the thing he wants to bring us into is into a place of rest. And so there are three kind of pictures that I want to communicate today to us. The first picture is that the Israelite people are going to be on the river's edge waiting to see what God might do. That's one picture. The other picture that I want to draw out today is that there is this remarkable turnaround of hearts for a portion of those people that we are going to see today. And the third thing is that, a little bit like last week where there was this unexpected hero of the story, Rahab, today the hero of this story is an unexpected hero as well. So we're going to pick up in Joshua 3. I'm just going to work my way through the chapter, pause it a few different times, draw out some key things for us. We're going to be looking broadly at Joshua 3 and 4 today. So it says this in Joshua 3 verse 1. Early in the morning, Joshua and all the Israelites set out from Shittim, that is an unfortunate name, and went to the Jordan where they camped before crossing over. After 3 days, the officers went throughout the camp, giving orders to the people: when you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God and the Levitical priests carrying it, you're going to move out from your positions and follow it. Now, that wouldn't have been like an unusual instruction for the leaders to give the people of God. They've been for decades following a pillar of cloud and fire by day and night through the wilderness. So the idea of if God moves, we move wouldn't have been unusual for them. Verse 4 says, "Then you will know which way to go, since you have not been this way before." Like, this was a sense new for all of them. They didn't really know where they were going. Like, yes, they were going to the promised land, and that had been promised for generations, and there was that anticipation of it, but they still very much are at the mercy of God's leading. It's a little bit like for us. We're about to cross over and gather together on Sundays. In a sense, we've waited for that for a long time, but we are still at the mercy of God's leading. I just want to show you later on this passage, that's actually a really wonderful place for us to be. Verse 5, Joshua told the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. What does it mean to consecrate yourselves? What did it mean for these guys? Well, it means that they prepared themselves in worship to God. That they washed their clothes, they washed themselves. There was no hanky-panky between husband and wife the night before. They were preparing themselves. They cleansed themselves. It was about getting their mind, their body, their spirit, their soul prepared to worship God as an act of worship. And for us as Christians, like, we might not follow the same acts of physical consecration, but God still calls us to prepare ourselves, to ready our minds, our hearts, our bodies for Christian ministry, to hear the word, to receive the word, believe the word, and to be actioning the word in our lives like it would have been for those Israelites. Verse 6, Joshua said to the priests, take up the Ark of the Covenant and pass on ahead of the people. So they took it up, and the ark, God's presence, went ahead of them. Jumping down to verse 8. Tell the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant, when you reach the edge of the Jordan waters, go and stand in the river. So let me pause for a moment and try to paint a picture of what this would have looked like. Now, the River Jordan varied greatly in flow depending on the time of year that it was. Now, at its narrowest, when the flow was the least, it was only as narrow as about 10 meters and about a meter deep. So if you were a really good long jumper, you could pretty much get across it without getting your socks wet. But in verse 15, it says that the Jordan River was at flood stage. So what did it look like at flood stage? It was like as wide as a kilometer and as deep as 50 meters. I mean, it varied greatly. Like, a kilometer is from the Doherty Centre to the back of Chatswood Chase. So the next time you walk in that direction for lunch, consider that's how wide the Jordan River was. Like, nobody was getting across that on their own, or almost nobody. I mean, I play futsal with some guys on Monday nights, and we've got some real athletes among us, and I think someone like Stefan could probably get across. He'd give it a decent shot. But you're not getting 1.5 million to 2.5 million people, which is how big the nation of Israel was at the time. You're not getting that many people across the River Jordan. That's like trying to get the whole of the city of Brisbane across this river at flood stage. A kilometer wide. It wasn't going to happen. And Joshua tells the people the plan. He says, when the ark moves, when God moves, then we're going to move. And then it says in verse 15, as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It's like this miracle began as their feet touched the water. That's when the water from upstream stopped flowing. And I think it's this beautiful picture of responding in faith to God and God responding to that faith. Responding in faith to God and God responding to that faith. It's this kind of mysterious thing, but God really seems to love and delight in and respond to faith. It says in Romans 14 that anything done apart from faith is sin. And it says in Hebrews 11 that without faith it's impossible to please God. And I know those verses have got context around them, but the general principle is God loves and delights in and responds to faith. But here's the thing that I didn't notice when I first looked at this passage. And the thing that maybe you might have missed too, because unless you dig a little deeper, you might not have seen it either. It says this in verse 16, the water from upstream stopped flowing and it piled up in a great heap, a great distance away at a town called Adam. Now, God didn't part the Red Sea like he had God didn't part the River Jordan the way that he had parted the Red Sea. Like Moses waved his staff and the Red Sea parted, the people walked across on dry ground. That's not what God did. It says that the water from upstream started piling up in a town called Adam, a great distance away. So how far is that great distance? Well, we know the people of God, they were crossing the River Jordan opposite Jericho, and from archaeological evidence, The town of Adam was about 30 kilometers away. That's like the entire length of the North Shore. So this is what I want you to try to picture in your mind. Let's pretend we're standing down one end of the North Shore in North Sydney, like maybe at that intersection where Miller Street and Pacific Highway meet, the old Australia Post building. Picture you're standing there, and the River Jordan is like the Pacific Highway, working its way up the North Shore. Well, Adam, that town of Adam, is like beyond Hornsby. That's how far away the waters began to pile up. And here's the point I want to make. If the waters stopped flowing there was still 30 kilometers of water that needed to make its way down the river before the Israelites could pass across on dry ground. Now let's pretend that water was probably flowing at about 10 kilometers an hour, roughly speaking, about the kind of pace of how quickly you'd run. Well, that would have taken, if it 10 kilometers an hour, 30 kilometers of river, 3 hours for the river to actually pass by before the Israelites could have crossed across on dry ground. Now, can you imagine how challenging those 3 hours would have been for everybody involved? Like, if you think about what it's like to be Joshua in that moment, there's already these questions looming about, will the people follow me like they followed Moses? And will God be with me like he was with Moses? Can you imagine Joshua thinking, come on, God, Moses waved his staff, the Red Sea parted. This is not a sea, it's just the Jordan River. Can't you do something like that? Already I've got this complex. I'm a bit nervous. Are the people going to follow me? You said you were going to be with me like you were with Moses, but it doesn't feel like anything's happening right now. Can you imagine what it would have been like for the person 2 millionth in the queue, ready to walk across? I can't see anything that's going on here. What is happening? All I can see is the river. How are we getting across that? Has anyone ordered boats? Is there a ferry coming? What's happening here? I was quite enjoying my time in Shittim. I met some nice people. There were some great coffee shops there. We got told we had to leave, come down and agonizingly camp down at the river. That's not my cup of tea. And then we got told to break camp, but for what? Nobody's communicating anything. I don't know what the plan is. Nobody's told us what is lying ahead. Can you imagine what it would have been like for the Levitical priests? They've stepped out in faith. They're standing in the water. And not much seems to be happening. All that's happening is their toes are getting wrinkly. And the ark is feeling heavier and heavier. It's like, Joe, did you bring a sandwich? Anyone pack a lunch here? Nothing seems to be going on. It would have been a really tough place for these people to be in. And here's the big idea. Sometimes God calls us to step out in faith, even though there aren't visible or immediate results for us. Sometimes he calls us to step out in faith, to wait, and to have patience for the miracle of God to happen. Sometimes he calls us to step out into that place of vulnerability. If God doesn't come through for me here, I'm going to look really foolish or worse. Sometimes that's what God calls us to do. But then perhaps, maybe from somewhere in the crowd of those 2 million people, somebody looks around the corner of the queue and, am I seeing something? It looks like the water's dropped. Are you guys seeing that? It looks like the water has dropped a little. Maybe something's beginning to happen. I don't know. Is that just my mind playing tricks on me? It looks like the water is beginning to drop. And then God begins to make a way for his people to pass through. Now, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge and to thank the many of you who have demonstrated this kind of faith, the faith to stand, the faith to wait, the faith to be patient for God to do a miracle among us. As leaders, we've not been this way before. Global pandemic and church unrest that's affected the church family. We've not been this way before. But as leaders, we've done our best to just tuck in behind where we felt God was leading. But we know that at times we've had to, and you've had to, we've all had to break camp and move forward, even though we've not had visibility of the dry ground that's supposedly up ahead for us. I just want to acknowledge that and say thank you. Thank you for stepping up. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you for standing firm. Thank you for leaning in to God at that time. We so appreciate it. God is beginning to do a miracle among us. And to that end, I just want to also skip forward to chapter 4, verse 12. Now the people have already passed across on dry ground now. And it says this, the men of Reuben and Gad and the half tribe of Manasseh, do you remember those three tribes that seem to get singled out for some reason? They crossed over ready for battle in front of the Israelites as Moses had directed them. About 40,000 armed for battle crossed over before the Lord to the plains of Jericho for war. Now, do you remember that question that was hanging over the people of God in chapter 1? Like, will those three tribes, Reuben, Gad, the half tribe of Manasseh, will they honor their commitment to Moses and come with the rest of the Israelites across the River Jordan into battle? Or will they hightail it out of there and leave? Well, here they are right now in this passage crossing over. But not only are they crossing over, did you see what it said? It said they were crossing over in front of the rest of the Israelites. There's been this remarkable turnaround of hearts here. These people who were like, you go on without us, we're just going to do our own thing, are right now in the middle of what's going on. And more than just being in the middle of it, they're actually out in front leading the nation forward. These people that we thought we were going to lose, we thought that they'd had enough of us, they're there right now in the middle of what is going on. It's this remarkable turnaround of hearts. It says again, remember in verse 12, they crossed over ready for battle in front of the Israelites as Moses had directed them, about 40,000 armed for battle. So not only did they cross over in front, they cross over in front, ready for battle as well. See, when Israel came to the River Jordan, they were about to cross it into the Promised Land. In a sense, they were crossing across into what God had promised them from generations beforehand. But at the very same time, they were also crossing across into enemy-occupied territory with all the challenges that go along with that. So as they cross over, they are armed and they are prepared for battle. And as Christians, we're unlikely to go into battle against a physical national power. But the Bible does say our war is not against flesh and blood, but against the spirits and principalities. We are in a battle, and we need to be spiritually prepared and spiritually armed for the spiritual war that we are confronted by. We as a people have broken camp. We are moving forward. We are crossing our River Jordans. We are about to gather together on Sundays, and we need to be prepared that there is a battle up ahead for us. Christian, this is your life. This is the life of the Christian. We are in a spiritual war. That's what the New Testament tells us time and time again. We're inching closer and closer to gathering together on Sundays, where we will enjoy the strength of being stronger in number, where we will be more public and more visible and more accessible for others to be able to join us in worshiping the God that we love and adore. We are going to be on the front foot more and more, and we need to be prepared for battle. We need to be armed for war and prepare ourselves for war. And that's why we're gathering on the first Sunday of every month to pray, to petition heaven, to clothe ourselves with spiritual armor, to remind ourselves that the battle belongs to the Lord, to join in his mission, to make sure we're aligned to his will. That's why we're praying the first Sunday of every month. And we're also praying outside of those contexts as well. That's why we also have Jericho Sunday next week. I know I haven't given a whole lot of information about what is entailed in that yet, but that's why we're planning Jericho Sunday for next week as well. We need to be prepared for battle and prepared for war. And verse 16 says this, so the people, that's including those Trans-Jordan tribes, they crossed over opposite Jericho. Verse 17, the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stopped in the middle of the Jordan and stood on dry ground. And while all Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed the crossing on dry ground. See, the ark, God's presence, went before them to make a way. It came up behind them as they came out of the River Jordan. And there, as they were passing through the River Jordan, the ark, God's presence, was right there in the midst of it with them. You see, I don't think this story is really about Joshua the leader. I don't think it's really about the people. It's not about the river. It's not about those Trans-Jordan tribes and the remarkable change of hearts that they had. It's not about the Levites and their wrinkly toes. Actually, the hero of this story is the box. The hero of this story is the Ark of the Covenant, is God's presence with his people. When you look at any part of the Bible through the lens of the gospel, you see Jesus there. Somebody once said to me that all scripture is either predictive, preparatory, descriptive, or resultant from the cross, or resultant from Jesus. Actually, it's all about him. And here in the box, we see this picture of Jesus, that he went before his people to make a way, that he was there in the midst of it, and he comes up behind them as well. If you consider, what are the contents of the Ark of the Covenant? I don't know if you know this. Do you know what's in the Ark of the Covenant? First of all, you've got manna that God used to feed the people of Israel while they were wandering through the desert. And then Jesus comes and he says, I'm the bread of life. I'm the one who feeds you. And you've got Aaron's staff, his shepherd's staff, the rod that budded. And then Jesus comes and he says, I'm the good shepherd. I'm the one who leads you. And then also in that box, you've got the 10 Commandments. And then Jesus comes and he fulfills every requirement of those commandments. And then he bleeds for us and fulfills the commandments so that we can be right with God. We see actually the box is like this picture of Jesus, that he feeds us, that he leads us, and that he bleeds for us. It's all about him. This picture is all about him. Think about Moses walked across the Red Sea on dry ground. Joshua walked across the River Jordan on dry ground. Then Jesus comes, he walks on top of the water as if it were dry ground. It's like Jesus is the better Moses. He's the better Joshua. Think about the people of God camped out on the river's edge for 3 days, waiting for God to do a miracle, waiting for him to make a way. Well, when else have the people of God waited for 3 days for God to do a miracle and God to make a way? In Jesus, God goes down into the depths for us in order to enable us to pass from death to life, from desert into the promised land. We see actually this is all about him. The story is all about Jesus. We see that this mystery of Jesus has been revealed in the early pages of Scripture, the early parts of human history. It's all about him. It's a story about him. And when I look at this story, it's not so much about 12 steps to overcoming obstacles in your life. It's not a story about overcoming obstacles. It's about encountering a person, in the person of Jesus. We see the people of God standing in faith on the edge of a river, waiting for the miracle to happen. We see these Transjordan tribes who have had this remarkable turnaround of heart and who are crossing over out in front, armed for battle. And we see that actually the hero of the story is a really unexpected hero. It's the box. It's God himself. God bless you guys. Love you heaps.